Okay, let's talk about properties of inverse trig functions. We introduced them in class today, but now we're going to start working with them. This is a snapshot out of your textbook, and the important thing you get from this is to realize anytime you're taking the arc sine of something, it has to be between -1 and 1. And if you're taking the sine of something, it has to be between -pi/2 and pi/2. Okay, cosine, same thing. If I'm taking the arc cosine of something, it has to be between -1 and 1. If I'm taking the cosine of something, this one has to be between 0 and pi. Okay, if I take the tangent, that number can be anything. But the arc tangent can be anything. If I'm taking the tangent, though, it needs to be between -pi/2 and pi/2. So basically, if you're taking the inverse sine, inverse cosine, so your arc sine, your arc cosine, this number needs to be between -1 and 1. If you are taking the sine or tangent, you need to be in quadrant 1 or quadrant 4. And if you're talking about cosine, you need to be in quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. Okay, if possible, find the exact value of tangent, arctangent, -5. Well, when we said arctangent on the page before, we could take the arctangent of anything. So the tangent of the arctangent is going to cancel out, and my answer is going to be -5. In the second example, sine. Now when I'm taking the sine of something, that number has to be in quadrant 1 or 4. So where's 5pi/3 right now? That is in quadrant 4, but it's not listed to be between -pi/2 and pi/2. So we need to get an equivalent. When we found coterminal angles, so add or subtract 2pi, 5pi/3, we need to subtract because we know it's going to be negative coming down right here. Minus, we need common denominators, so 6pi/3 would be the equivalent of 2pi. So that's going to be -pi/3. Now that's the equivalent, so now I'm talking about the arc sine of -pi/3. Now that's a legal move. We can say that's -pi/3 because the arc sine and the sine will cancel each other out. One more. If I'm taking the inverse cosine, I need to remember that it has to be between -1 and 1. Pi does not fall in this one, so this one's not possible. Okay, you try these and then come back and check. Inverse tangent, I can take of any number. Tangent, arctangent, it's going to cancel each other out, -14. If possible, find the exact value of sine of arc sine of pi. Well, pi lands over here, and that is not in our two quadrants that we need that to be in, so this one's going to be not possible. Find the cosine of the arc cosine of 0.54. If I'm taking the inverse cosine, it needs to be between -1 and 1. It is. Cosine, arc cosine cancel out, 0.54. Okay, evaluating compositions of functions, putting basically one into the other. We're going to start working with the inside. We're going to call this part u. So u equals arc cosine of 2/3. Or if I move my inverse cosine to the other side and uninverse it, this is cosine of u equals 2/3. From this, I can create a right triangle, cosine, quadrant 1 or 2 only. So quadrant 1, I can set this up. My adjacent is 2, hypotenuse 3. So here's my angle u. Now I need to find tangent u, because that was my original question. So I need to figure out my opposite. So the square root of 3 squared minus 2 squared is going to be square root 5. So now I'm going to get opposite over adjacent, square root 5 over 2. Let me re-say this again. This we substitute in for u, move the cosine to the other side, so cosine u equals 2/3. We set up our triangle, adjacent over hypotenuse, that's cosine. Fill in the missing side, then answer the last question. Tangent of that angle, opposite over adjacent. Okay, same thing. We're going to call this u. So that's going to mean sine of u equals -3/5. So I need to be in a quadrant that's a negative sign. Sine is only in quadrant 1 and 4 when we're talking about inverses. So I know I need to be in quadrant 4. If my sine is my opposite over my hypotenuse, -3 over 5. Solve for my missing side, that's got to be 4. And then answer cosine of this angle is going to be 4/5. Now you try a couple and then come back and check. Tangent means I've got to be in quadrant 1 or 4. If I'm negative, I've got to be in quadrant 4. Let me set this up. This means tangent of u equals -3/4. So my opposite over my adjacent, hypotenuse. Now the cosine of that angle, adjacent over hypotenuse, 4/5 again. Okay, this one try again before we go on. This means that cosine of an angle u equals 2/3. It's positive. I'm going to be in triangle 1. Adjacent over hypotenuse. Now I need to find the missing side. 9 minus 4, so this is radical 5. And then I need the sine of this angle, so radical 5 over 2. Okay, sine of arctan of x. So this one's a little bit different. Tangent of u is going to equal x. So I'm going to default it into quadrant 1. Opposite over adjacent. That'll set up my triangle. And I need the sine of this, so I'm going to have to solve for the hypotenuse. So that's going to end up being the square root of x squared plus 1 squared, or 1. And then that's it. Find the sine, so I need opposite over hypotenuse, so that'd be x over square root x squared plus 1. And the exact value of secant of arcsine of x minus 1. Use this part to set up your triangle. That means that sine of u is going to equal x minus 1. So quadrant 1, opposite is going to be x minus 1, hypotenuse of 1. This one, missing side, square root of 1 squared minus x minus 1 squared. So now if I want the secant of this, that would be my hypotenuse over my adjacent. So 1 over square root 1 minus x minus 1 squared. This can be simplified underneath here. 1 minus, that'd be x minus 1 times x minus 1. would be 1 minus x squared minus 2x plus 1, which would become, the ones are going to cancel, negative x squared plus 2x. So it is the same as 1 over the square root of negative x squared plus 2x. I would take either of these answers, but if you wanted to simplify it down, you can. And one for you to try before you check your work. Okay, so tangent of u is going to equal 4 over x. That sets up my triangle. Opposite over adjacent. Solve for the missing side. That'd be 4 squared plus x squared, or 16 plus x squared. Cotangent would actually just be flipped over. I didn't even need the hypotenuse. Would be x over 4. Instead of opposite over adjacent, adjacent over hypotenuse.